Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the massive view screen display what should have been impossible. 12,000 ships hung motionless in the void, their hulls reflecting the distant light of Kepler 442. The IGI Galactic Defense Fleet, the most powerful armada in known space, sat dead in the water. "Status report," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge's stunned quiet. Lieutenant Marcus Webb turned from his console, his dark face pale with disbelief. "Ma'am, we're reading 0 energy signatures from the entire fleet. No life, support, no propulsion, no communications. It's like they just switched off." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, leaned over the tactical display. Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she traced the formation patterns. "This isn't random, Commander. Look at the positioning. They're arranged in perfect, defensive formations. Whatever happened, it happened fast." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The Galactic Defense Fleet represented 47 different species from across the Milky Way, technologies that had taken millennia to develop, ships that could crack planets in half, and now they floated like cosmic tombstones. "How many?" she whispered. 12,347 vessels, Webb replied. "Crew complement, approximately 8.2 million beings." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah had served in the Terran Space Navy for 15 years, had seen her share of battles and losses. But this was beyond warfare. This was extinction-level catastrophe. "Commander," came a voice from behind her. Captain James Morrison, the Endeavour's commanding officer, approached with grim determination etched into his weathered features. "We just received a priority transmission from Earth Command. We're to maintain safe distance and gather intelligence, only. No boarding, no rescue attempts." Sarah turned to face him, her jaw set. "Sir, there might be survivors." "That's an order, Commander." Morrison's tone brooked no argument, but Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. "We don't know what did this. Could be a weapon, could be a plague, could be something we don't even have words for yet." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her scanner readings. "Captain, I'm detecting some unusual energy patterns in the debris field. It's faint, but there's definitely something there. Something organic." Before Morrison could respond, the ship's communications, Officer Ensign Park spun around with wide eyes. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." "From the fleet?" Sarah asked hopefully. "No, ma'am. From deep space. It's not using any known communication protocol." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Morrison strode to the communication station. "Put it through. Audio only." What emerged from the speakers wasn't quite sound and wasn't quite silence. It was something in between. A whisper that seemed to speak directly to their minds rather than their ears. When it formed words, they came in perfect galactic standard, though no vocal cords in the known universe could have produced those tones. "The harvest is complete. The strong have been separated from the weak. Those who would stand as guardians of this galaxy have proven themselves insufficient." Sarah felt every hair on her body stand on end. Around the bridge, she could see her crewmates experiencing the same primal terror. "But you remain. The young species, the unproven ones. How curious." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific mind overriding her fear. "What are you? What did you do to them?" A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the comm system. "We are what comes after. We are the conclusion to every story your species tells itself about heroes and hope. And as for what we did," the voice paused, and Sarah could swear she felt something vast and cold turning its attention toward them. "We offered them a choice. Serve us or sleep forever. They chose poorly." "And what choice do we get?" Morrison demanded, his command, voice steady despite the circumstances. "Oh, little captain, you misunderstand. You were never meant to be part of this. You are too young, too primitive, too insignificant. But perhaps that makes you useful. Yes, we think you might serve as an adequate messenger." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in deafening silence. Sarah looked around at her crewmates. Humans all, the youngest species to achieve interstellar flight, barely a century since first contact with the galactic community. Earth's total population was less than the crew complement of the dead fleet floating before them. "Commander," Webb said quietly, "we're detecting energy spikes throughout the debris field. Something's happening." On the main screen, the dead ships began to move, not under their own power. They drifted like leaves in an invisible current, slowly rotating to face the Endeavor. As they turned, Sarah could see massive tears in their hulls, wounds that looked almost surgical in their precision. "My God," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "Look at the damage patterns. It's like something reached inside each ship and just extracted what it wanted." Morrison keyed the ship-wide comm. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. We're leaving. Now." But as the Endeavor's engines began to spin up, every screen on the bridge flickered and displayed the same message in burning letters. "Run, little messenger. Tell your species what you have seen. The harvesters are coming." The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind the silent graveyard that had once been the galaxy's greatest hope. But as they fled through folded space toward Earth, none of them could shake the feeling that they weren't running away from something. They were running toward it. Chapter 2. The Message. 3 days after the Endeavor's return to Earth, every major city on the planet had erupted into chaos. Sarah stood in the Pentagon's Situation Room, watching news feeds from around the world as riots tore through the streets. The official report of the Galactic Defense Fleet's destruction had leaked within hours of their debriefing, and humanity's reaction had been swift and predictable. Panic. 47 billion people across the galaxy, General Patricia Hayes said, reviewing the casualty reports. "Gone in what appears to be minutes, and we're supposed to be next." Admiral Zhang, head of the Terran Space Navy, pulled up tactical displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses. "Our entire fleet consists of 312 ships, most of them exploration vessels with minimal armaments. We have exactly 17 proper warships, and our most advanced weapon systems are based on technology the Galactic Council gave us 50 years ago as training aids." Sarah studied the faces around the table, the best military minds humanity had to offer, and every one of them looked like they were attending their own funeral. "What about evacuation?" asked Dr. Martinez, Earth's lead xenopolitical advisor. "Colony ships, exodus protocols?" "To where?" Admiral Zhang replied bitterly. "Every major civilization in the galaxy had their fleets in that formation. The Zephyrians, the Crystalline Collective, the Hive Worlds, all of them. If these harvesters could take them out that easily, nowhere is safe." Dr. Vasquez, who had been quietly reviewing her sensor data from the encounter, looked up with troubled eyes. "I've been analyzing the energy signatures we detected. Whatever technology they used, it's not just advanced, it's operating on principles we don't understand. The organic patterns I detected, it's like they're partially existing in our dimension and partially somewhere else." "English, Doctor," General Hayes said tersely. "They're not entirely physical beings as we understand them. Think of them as existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. That's how they could reach inside those ships and extract whatever they took." Morrison, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. "The question isn't what they are or how they did it. The question is why they called us messengers." The room fell quiet. Sarah had been wondering the same thing. "They could have destroyed us along with the fleet," Morrison continued. "They didn't. They specifically said we were too young, too primitive to be worth harvesting, but useful as messengers." "Messengers for what?" Admiral Zhang asked. Before anyone could answer, the lights in the Situation Room dimmed and every screen in the Pentagon began displaying the same image, a star map of the local galactic arm, with hundreds of red dots appearing and spreading. Like a cancer, the voice that had haunted Sarah's dreams for 3 days whispered from every speaker in the building. "People of Earth, your defenders are gone. Your protectors sleep the endless sleep. Across this galaxy, 68 billion souls now serve our purpose. Dr. Martinez grabbed the edge of the table. 68 billion? But the fleet was only 8 million. The fleet was merely the first course. In the days since your little ship fled, we have visited 17 homeworlds. Each population chose the same as their guardians. They preferred sleep to service. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 17 homeworlds, the major population centers of galactic civilization, each with billions of inhabitants. But you, young humans, were deemed unworthy of the choice. Too weak to serve, too insignificant to bother harvesting. We had planned to leave you to wither in your isolation. The star map zoomed in on Earth, the blue marble glowing alone in a sea of red. However, we find ourselves amused by your reactions to our message, your chaos, your despair, your complete inability to comprehend the magnitude of what approaches. It has given us an idea. General Hayes found her voice. What do you want? Entertainment. You see, harvesting entire civilizations, while necessary, can become quite tedious. Always the same responses: defiance, then bargaining, then acceptance, then sleep. But you might provide something different. The display changed to show massive ships emerging from some kind of spatial rift near the edge of the solar system. Sarah counted dozens, then hundreds, then stopped counting altogether. We offer you a game, little humans. You have 60 standard days to prepare. On the 61st day, we will come for your world. If you can provide us with interesting resistance, not victory, we harbor no delusions about your chances, but genuine entertainment. Then we will grant you the same choice we offered the others. Serve us, or sleep. The map zoomed out to show the entire galaxy, now dominated by spreading red zones, and if you bore us, well, we have never encountered a species so fundamentally insignificant that they warranted immediate extinction rather than harvesting. You would be the first. Morrison stood up slowly. And if we refuse to play your game at all? Then you prove our initial assessment correct, and we will demonstrate why extinction is considered a less preferable fate than harvesting. The screens went black, then displayed a countdown timer. 59 days, 23 hours, 47 minutes. In the silence that followed, Sarah looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. She saw fear, certainly. Despair. But also something else. Something that maybe the harvesters hadn't expected to find in a species they deemed too primitive to bother with. She saw anger. Well, Admiral Zhang said finally, his voice deadly, calm. I guess we'd better get to work. General Hayes nodded grimly. Emergency session of the World Council in 6 hours. We're going to need every resource, every mind, every weapon this planet can produce. As the meeting broke up and the leaders hurried away to begin humanity's most desperate hour, Sarah remained behind with Dr. Vasquez and Morrison. Captain, she said quietly, what are our actual chances? Morrison considered the question seriously. Against the force that destroyed the Galactic Defense Fleet? Militarily? 0. Then what are we fighting for? Morrison looked at the countdown timer still glowing on the main screen. Same thing humans have always fought for when faced with impossible odds, Commander. The right to go down swinging. But, as they left the situation room, none of them noticed Dr. Vasquez lagging behind, staring at her portable scanner with the expression of growing excitement. The energy readings she'd taken from the harvester ships were familiar. Not identical, but familiar. She'd seen similar patterns before, in her research into quantum consciousness and dimensional interface theory. For the first time in days, Elena Vasquez allowed herself to smile. Chapter 3. The Defiance Protocol 37. Days into humanity's countdown to extinction, the impossible was happening in laboratories, shipyards, and research facilities across Earth. Sarah walked through the chaos of the hastily constructed Nevada Research Complex, where the greatest minds of humanity worked alongside automated manufacturing, systems that hadn't stopped running for 5 weeks. The air hummed with desperate energy as scientists, engineers, and military personnel collaborated on projects that would have been considered fantasy just 2 months ago. "Commander Chen," Dr. Vasquez called out from across the main lab. "You need to see this." Sarah made her way through the maze of equipment, noting how much weight Elena had lost. They all had. Sleep was a luxury none of them could afford. "Please tell me you have good news," Sarah said, examining the complex array of quantum field generators that dominated the center of the lab. "Better than good," Elena replied, her eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. "I think I know why the harvesters called us messengers." She pulled up a holographic display showing the energy patterns they'd recorded from the silent fleet. "Remember these organic readings? I've been analyzing them nonstop since we got back. They're not just organic, they're consciousness patterns." Sarah frowned. "I don't understand." "The harvesters don't just kill their victims," Elena explained, manipulating the display to show wave formations that pulsed like heartbeats. "They extract their consciousness, their souls if you will, and store them in some kind of quantum matrix. The bodies die, but the minds are trapped," Sarah finished, horror dawning on her face. "That's what they meant by harvesting. They're collecting sentient consciousness." "Exactly. And here's the really terrifying part. The patterns suggest they've been doing this for millennia. The consciousness signatures I'm detecting aren't just from the recent attacks. Some of these patterns are ancient. We're talking about hundreds of civilizations, maybe thousands." Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Morrison's voice echoed from the facility's speakers. "All personnel to stations. We have incoming visitors. Multiple contacts approaching Earth at faster than light velocities." Sarah and Elena ran to the main command center, where Morrison stood before a massive tactical display showing the solar system. Red dots were appearing throughout the outer system, dozens of them moving in formation toward Earth. "I thought we had 23 days left," Admiral Zhang said, his face grim. Morrison shook his head. "These aren't the main force. Scout ships maybe, or..." He paused as the display updated with new information. "Or they're coming to check on our progress." The lead contact entered Earth's communication range, and the familiar whisper filled the command center. "Greetings, little humans. We hope you have been using your time wisely." Morrison stepped forward. "We're using every day you gave us." "Excellent. We have come to observe your preparations. You have surprised us already with your industriousness. Most species spend their final weeks in despair or futile exodus attempts, but you have been building something." The display showed detailed scans of Earth's surface, highlighting the dozens of research and manufacturing facilities that had sprung up across the globe. "What is it you think you are creating that will entertain us?" Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of her colleagues. They had agreed on this moment weeks ago, the moment when they would show their hand, or at least part of it. Morrison nodded to Admiral Zhang, who activated a control panel. Throughout Earth's orbital space, previously hidden defensive platforms began powering up. Energy signatures that had been masked for weeks suddenly blazed to life. "Ah," the voice said, and Sarah could swear she heard approval. "Weapons. How predictably martial. But these are interesting, not based on galactic standard technology." "No," Morrison replied firmly. "They're human designs, built with human ingenuity and powered by human determination." The lead scout ship moved closer to one of the orbital platforms, scanning it intensively. "Fascinating. Crude, but creative. You have taken principles from 17 different technological paradigms and combined them in ways that should not work, yet somehow do." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "They work because we don't know they shouldn't. Sometimes ignorance is an advantage." The scientist speaks truth. Your ignorance of proper limitations has led you to improvise. Most entertaining. "But surely you realize that weapons alone will not preserve you." Sarah felt her heart racing, but Morrison's voice remained steady. "We're not just building weapons. We're building something you've never encountered before." "And what might that be?" Hope, Morrison said simply. The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. When the voice returned, it carried a note of something that might have been uncertainty. Hope is not a military strategy, Captain Morrison. Isn't it? Morrison replied. You harvest consciousness because you need something from sentient beings that you can't create yourselves. You feed on our achievements, our creativity, our will to survive. But hope? Hope is the one thing you can't harvest from unwilling victims. Another pause. You theorize that hope is our weakness. An interesting hypothesis. We look forward to testing it in 23 days. The scout ships began to withdraw, but the voice continued. We will leave observation posts to monitor your progress. Continue your preparations, little humans. We find ourselves genuinely curious about what you will produce. As the contacts disappeared from the display, the command center erupted in discussion. But Sarah noticed that Dr. Vasquez was smiling. Elena, she said quietly, what aren't you telling us? Elena looked around to make sure they weren't overheard, then leaned in close. The quantum consciousness research isn't just about understanding how they harvest minds. I think I've found a way to reverse it. Sarah's eyes widened. You mean rescue the people they've already taken? Maybe. But it would require getting close to their harvesting matrix. Very close. And the power requirements would be enormous. More than our entire planetary grid could provide. Morrison, who had overheard, joined their quiet conversation. What kind of power are we talking about? Elena's smile turned grim. The kind you only get from completely converting matter to energy. A lot of matter. Sarah understood immediately. You're talking about sacrificing our entire planet to power the rescue attempt. Not the entire planet, but a significant portion of it. Maybe a continent, maybe two. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Draft the proposal. Full specifications, power requirements, probability of success. We'll present it to the World Council tomorrow. As Elena hurried away to prepare her presentation, Sarah grabbed Morrison's arm. Captain, even if this works, even if we could rescue the harvested consciousness of 68 billion beings, where would we put them? Earth barely supports 8 billion as it is. Morrison looked out at the stars through the command center's observation windows. Commander, if we're successful, I don't think the survivors are going to want to stay in this galaxy anyway. And honestly, after seeing what's out there, he paused. I'm not sure I blame them. But neither of them noticed the faint energy, readings emanating from Earth's molten core, where ancient automated systems had begun responding to the quantum resonance of the harvester technology. Something very old was waking up beneath their feet. Chapter 4. The Final Gambit On. The 60th day, with less than 24 hours remaining on the countdown, humanity made its final preparations for a battle they couldn't win. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the New Endeavor, humanity's first true warship, built in the orbital shipyards using technology that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Around her, the combined Earth defense fleet, all 397 ships humanity could muster, hung in formation around the planet. It was pathetic compared to the Galactic defense fleet that had been destroyed so easily. But it was theirs. Final systems check complete, reported Lieutenant Webb from the bridge. All ships report ready for Operation Defiance. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the other elements of humanity's desperate gambit. The orbital defense platforms glowed with barely contained energy. On the planet's surface, the massive quantum resonance generators Dr. Vasquez had designed hummed with power drawn from fusion reactors scattered across 6 continents. And deep beneath the Earth's crust, something ancient was stirring. Morrison joined her at the observation windows. Second thoughts, Commander? About a dozen per minute, Sarah replied. But no regrets. If we're going out human style. Which is? Loud, stubborn, and with absolutely no sense of when to quit. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Webb's voice crackled over the comm. Contact. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. It's them. Sarah and Morrison rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed the impossible scope of the Harvester fleet. Hundreds of massive vessels, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities, arranged in perfect formations that seemed to bend space around them. Greetings, little humans, the familiar voice whispered from every speaker. Your time of preparation is complete. We come now to see what entertainment you have prepared for us. Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system. This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. You want entertainment? Let me tell you what humans do for fun. He nodded to Admiral Jang, who was coordinating the battle from Earth's surface. The first phase of Operation Defiance began. Every new orbital platform fired simultaneously, not at the Harvester ships but at specific points in space around them. The beams weren't conventional weapons. They were spatial distortion projectors designed to create artificial gravity wells and hyperspace interference. Clever, the voice acknowledged as several Harvester ships found their movements suddenly constrained. You seek to limit our mobility. Primitive but resourceful. The Harvester response was swift. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, destroying half of Earth's orbital platforms in seconds. But those seconds were all humanity needed. Phase 2, Morrison commanded. Dr. Vasquez, working frantically at her quantum resonance station, activated the consciousness detection array she'd been perfecting for 2 months. Immediately, the screens around her lit up with impossible readings. God, she breathed. There are so many of them. The quantum signatures of harvested consciousness weren't just coming from the Harvester ships. They were coming from everywhere. A vast network of imprisoned minds that stretched across the galaxy like a web of suffering. You detect our collection, the voice said. And for the first time, Sarah thought she heard pride in those alien tones. 68 billion souls from this galaxy alone. But we are old little humans. We have harvested the consciousness of 1,000 galaxies. Your entire universe of sentient thought could not match what we have gathered. That's what we were counting on, Morrison said grimly. Elena now. Dr. Vasquez activated the quantum consciousness resonance projector. The device she'd built using principles no other species had ever conceived, began broadcasting a signal unlike anything the universe had ever seen. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a weapon. It was something far more dangerous to beings who fed on harvested consciousness. It was a wake-up call. Across the galaxy, in the quantum matrices where billions of imprisoned minds existed in enforced slumber, Elena's signal began to resonate. The consciousness patterns that the Harvesters had carefully maintained in docile captivity began to remember. They remembered who they were. They remembered their homes, their families, their freedom, and they remembered their anger. What have you done? The Harvester voice suddenly carried notes of alarm. This is impossible. The harvested consciousness cannot be awakened. You said it yourself, Sarah called out as alarms began blaring throughout the Harvester fleet. Our ignorance of proper limitations leads us to improvise. The effect spread faster than light itself, carried by the quantum entanglement that connected all consciousness across the universe. 68 billion minds suddenly woke up from their enforced dreams and realized they were prisoners, and they began to fight. The Harvester ships, which had been advancing steadily toward Earth, suddenly stopped. Energy patterns across their hulls fluctuated wildly as the consciousness matrices that powered their technology became battlegrounds between captors and captives. You cannot free them! The voice shrieked, no longer whispered but projected, at painful volumes. They are ours. We have claimed them across 1,000,000 years. Wrong, Morrison replied, watching as several Harvester ships began to tear themselves apart from internal conflicts. You never asked them if they wanted to be claimed. Big mistake. But even as the Harvester fleet writhed in chaos, more ships were arriving. Thousands of them, emerging from some kind of dimensional portal that opened like a wound in space. Elena, Sarah called out. "Whatever else you're planning now would be good." Dr. Vasquez was making final adjustments to her equipment with shaking hands. "The consciousness resonance is working, but it's not enough. We need more power to break the quantum locks completely." "How much more?" Elena looked at her with eyes that held both terror and determination. "Everything, Sarah. We need to convert the entire planetary mass to energy. All of it." Morrison turned to face her. "That would destroy Earth completely." "Yes, but it would free every consciousness the Harvesters have ever taken. Across every galaxy they've touched, the quantum cascade would spread through their entire network." Sarah looked at the tactical display, where Earth's puny fleet was being systematically destroyed by the incoming Harvester reinforcements. They had minutes, maybe less. "Do it," Morrison ordered. But before Elena could activate the final sequence, the deck beneath their feet shuddered. Emergency lights flickered, and Webb called out from his station. "Captain, we're reading massive seismic activity across Earth's surface. Something's happening in the planetary core." The main view screen switched to show Earth itself, where vast, geometric patterns were appearing across the continents. Ancient structures were rising from beneath mountains and ocean floors, structures that looked impossibly familiar. "This is impossible," the Harvester voice whispered, carrying genuine fear for the first time. "The builders were extinct. We made certain of it. We harvested them ourselves eons ago." Dr. Vasquez stared at her readings in amazement. "The quantum signatures I've been detecting from Earth's core, they're not natural geological formations. They're technology. Ancient technology that's been dormant for millions of years." As they watched, the revealed structures began to glow with the same energy patterns Elena had learned to associate with consciousness manipulation. But these patterns were different. Where the Harvester technology sought to trap and contain consciousness, the ancient system seemed designed to liberate it. The structures reached full power, and suddenly every human on Earth could hear a new voice in their minds. Not whispered like the Harvesters, but warm and strong and infinitely sad. "Children of Earth, we are the builders. Long ago, we seeded this world with the potential for consciousness expansion, hoping that someday a species would arise that could complete what we began. We see now that our hope was not misplaced." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as understanding dawned. "We're not the first, are we? You've been preparing other species, other worlds." "Yes. Across the universe, we planted seeds like this. One. Most were discovered and destroyed by the Harvesters before they could reach maturity. But some, like yours, remained hidden until the moment of greatest need. The ancient systems reached full activation, and the effect was immediate. The quantum consciousness network that Elena had partially awakened suddenly blazed to life with the power of an entire planetary civilization. But instead of destroying Earth, the builder technology channeled that energy into something unprecedented. Every consciousness the Harvesters had ever taken, not just the recent victims, but the accumulated suffering of 1,000,000 years, suddenly broke free simultaneously. The Harvester fleet didn't just fall apart. It imploded as trillions of liberated minds turned their combined will against their captors. Ships that had existed for eons simply stopped existing, consumed by the rage of their former prisoners. "This cannot be," the Harvester voice screamed as their dimensional portal began to collapse. "We are eternal. We are the culmination of all consciousness." "You are parasites," came the combined voice of every mind they had ever enslaved. "And your time is over." The portal collapsed completely, taking the remaining Harvester ships with it. In the space of minutes, a threat that had existed since the dawn of galactic civilization simply ended. In the silence that followed, Sarah found herself alone on the bridge with Morrison and Dr. Vasquez. Through the viewports, they could see Earth's surface being transformed as the ancient builder technology continued to activate dormant systems across the planet. "Children of Earth," the builder voice spoke again, "you have accomplished what we could not. Through your courage and your refusal to accept the impossible, you have broken a cycle of suffering that has lasted since the universe was young. What happens now? Morrison asked. Now the consciousness that was stolen is free to choose its own path. Some will return to bodies. Some will explore new forms of existence. Some will choose to join us in the spaces between dimensions. But all will choose freely as consciousness should. Elena looked at her readings with wonder. The quantum cascade is still spreading. Every harvester stronghold across the universe is being liberated simultaneously. This isn't just victory, it's universal liberation. And you, brave humans, have earned a choice of your own. You may remain on your transformed world, which will become a nexus of consciousness exploration. Or you may travel the stars, carrying the gift of liberation to any remnants of the harvester plague that still exist. Sarah looked around at her crewmates, then out at the stars that suddenly seemed less dark and cold than they had that morning. What do you think, Captain? She asked Morrison. Ready for humanity's next impossible mission? Morrison smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 2 months. Commander, when has humanity ever turned down a chance to explore the unknown? As the new endeavor and the survivors of Earth's defense fleet prepared for their new role as liberators of consciousness across the universe, none of them noticed the small figure watching from the shadows of the builder ruins on Earth's surface. Dr. Elena Vasquez had chosen to stay behind, to study the ancient technology and prepare for the next species that might need humanity's help, because she had learned something from the builder systems that she hadn't shared with the others. The harvesters weren't the only consciousness predators in the universe, they were just the first wave. But now, thanks to a species too young to know when to quit, the universe finally had defenders who understood that some things were worth any sacrifice. The age of harvesting was over. The age of liberation had begun. Epilogue. The New Guardians. 1 year later, Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Liberator, flagship of humanity's consciousness liberation fleet, as they approached the Andromeda Galaxy. The ship was unlike anything that had existed before the war with the Harvesters. Built using a combination of human ingenuity, builder technology, and insights gained from the liberated consciousness of 1,000 different species, it existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum realm where consciousness itself dwelled. Status report, Sarah commanded, settling into the captain's chair she'd earned through a year of impossible victories. We're detecting 17 Harvester-class signatures in the target system, reported Lieutenant Webb, now her second-in-command aboard humanity's most advanced vessel. It looks like a breeding facility, approximately 400,000 consciousness patterns in storage. Sarah nodded grimly. They'd found dozens of such facilities in their travels, the remnants of the Harvester civilization that had been cut off from the main network when the quantum cascade destroyed the central control matrix. Without their masters, these automated systems continued their grim work, harvesting any consciousness they encountered and storing it in endless sleep. Dr. Martinez, are the liberation arrays ready? The ship's consciousness technician, a discipline that hadn't existed a year ago, checked her instruments. All systems green, Commander. The new quantum resonance projectors should be able to free the stored patterns and provide them with temporary housing until they can choose permanent forms. Sarah looked out at the stars of an alien galaxy, thinking about how much had changed. Earth's population had swelled to nearly 20 billion, as liberated consciousness chose to incarnate in human bodies, bringing with them the knowledge and wisdom of countless civilizations. Other consciousness chose different forms: energy, beings, crystalline matrices, or collective entities that spanned multiple dimensions. Humanity had become not just a species, but a philosophy. The philosophy that consciousness should be free to choose its own path, no matter what form it took. Communications, Sarah ordered. Broadcast our standard liberation message on all frequencies. Aye, Commander. The message went out across the system, translated into every known language by the ship's consciousness collective, the voluntary partnership between human minds and liberated alien intelligence that made such feats possible. To any consciousness held in storage against its will, you are not alone. Liberation is coming. To any automated systems continuing the work of the Harvesters, your masters are gone. Your purpose is ended. Stand down and allow us to free those you hold, or be destroyed. The response came immediately, not in words but in the form of weapons fire from the harvester facility. Apparently, some systems were programmed to fight until completely destroyed. So be it, Sarah said calmly. All ships, commence liberation protocol. Remember, our goal is to free the stored consciousness, not to win a military victory. Minimum destruction of storage facilities. The battle that followed would have been impossible for the old humanity, the species that had been deemed too primitive to bother harvesting. But the new humanity, enhanced by willing partnership with countless alien minds, fought with the combined knowledge of civilizations spanning millions of years. The harvester facility's defenses were formidable. Weapons that could shatter planets, shields that bent reality itself, but they were designed to fight conventional enemies, not beings who could exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The Liberator and its escort ships phased in and out of normal space, striking at the facility's quantum matrices while avoiding its most devastating weapons. It was a dance of liberation, choreographed by the combined tactical genius of 100 different species. Breakthrough on Storage Bay 7, Webb reported. We're detecting consciousness awakening throughout that section. Sarah felt the familiar surge of hope that came with every successful liberation. Patch me through to the awakening minds. The ship's consciousness collective established the connection, and suddenly Sarah could feel the confusion and wonder of beings awakening from enforced sleep. Some had been imprisoned for mere years, others for millennia. All carried the same mixture of disbelief and gratitude. You are safe, she projected to them through the quantum link. You are free, the harvesters are gone, and you may choose your own path forward. The response came as a chorus of different mental voices, some human-like, others so alien that they required translation by the collective. Free? But that is impossible. The harvesters are eternal. Who are you, little liberator? What species dares to challenge the harvest? The chains, they are truly broken, after so long. We are human, Sarah replied, and felt the collective consciousness of her ship add their own voices to hers. We are the species that was too young to harvest, too primitive to matter. We are the ones who didn't know when to quit. Laughter rippled through the quantum connection, not mockery, but the joy of beings discovering that hope had survived, in the most unlikely form. The battle continued for 3 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The automated harvester systems, formidable as they were, couldn't adapt to enemies who fought with love instead of hatred, who sought to preserve rather than destroy. When the last storage matrix was liberated and the facility's weapons fell, silent, Sarah stood before the main view screen watching 400,000 points of light, each one a consciousness choosing its new form of existence. Some became beings of pure energy, dancing among the stars. Others requested bodies similar to their original forms, manifested by the ship's matter converters. A few chose to join the collective consciousness that partnered with humanity, adding their knowledge and experience to the growing repository of liberation wisdom. But the moment that touched Sarah most deeply came when a small group of the liberated consciousness approached her through the quantum link with a simple request. Teach us to be liberators. Show us how to fight as you fight, to free others as you have freed us. Sarah smiled, thinking of Dr. Vasquez back on Earth, training the next generation of consciousness technicians, of the thousands of liberated beings who had chosen to join humanity's mission rather than seek their own paths, of the growing fleet of liberation ships spreading across the universe, each one crewed by beings who had learned that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Webb, she said, set course for the next target system. We have 4 more facilities to liberate in this galaxy before we can move on to the next. Aye, Commander. The collective has identified a major storage nexus 3 light-years from here. Estimated consciousness count, 2 million. As the Liberator jumped to its next mission, Sarah reflected on the message they'd received from Earth just that morning. The planet's transformation was complete. It had become a nexus world where consciousness from across the universe came to learn, to heal, and to prepare for their own liberation missions. And in the deepest archives of the Builder ruins, Dr. Vasquez had made a discovery that would change everything again. Evidence that the harvesters themselves had once been victims. A species so completely consumed by their own consciousness predators that they had become the very thing that destroyed them, which meant somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, something even worse was waiting. But Sarah wasn't worried. After all, humanity had a proven track record with impossible odds. The universe was vast, and consciousness was sacred. There would always be more beings to liberate, more freedoms to restore, more hope to kindle in the darkness. And there would always be humans willing to stand up and answer the call, because that's what humans did when the galaxy turned away. They stood up anyway. The end.